Yeah. Good evening. Welcome to this group discussion on disaster management. I hope you people have read up about this. Reading the chapter in Bailey Love, you will find is grossly inadequate. Okay. I hope you did some search of the papers regarding this and then try to learn a bit about it. It's an extremely important topic and an equally neglected topic, I'm sorry to say. Many health systems and hospitals have not managed to put their mind to it. And as we go along, when we finish the discussion, you'll realize how uh, inadequately prepared we all are. Uh, the subject is vast. I can't really talk about uh, individual aspects of disasters, but what we should do is have a global view, a holistic view, and understand the principles involved in disaster management. And our generation has not succeeded in getting our systems to come up to speed. And I hope you youngsters, when you take up consultant positions, will do better than us and get some systems going, or at least keep talking about it beyond a short note in an exam. At the moment, it remains a short note in an exam, and that is honestly disappointing. I think all of us should be thinking about disaster and be prepared for it um, in our systems. And as you can see, it's not often that you see a disaster. You may never see one in your whole career, but being prepared, having the knowledge to deal with the crisis is something that we must always work on. All right. So let's start with very simple things. Mahati, what do you think a disaster is?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Uh, any disaster which resulting in a number of victims that is large enough to disrupt the healthcare services, resulting in mass casualty, where the
Mhm.
number of patients are more than the hospital resources.
Yeah. That's good enough. Yeah. Sudden accident or a natural catastrophe that causes great damage and loss of life. Okay. And you're quite right. This is a layman's definition. And if you look at a more detailed definition, the serious disruption of the community, widespread human, material, economic, and environmental loss. Very important, it should exceed the ability to cope. Okay, that is a disaster. When you have a healthcare system, you have hospitals and the like, and you find that your systems, your resources are not able to deal with the kind of workload that you get with patients, with the variety of damage that they could have incurred, then that is a disaster. Okay, and so the only thing that you can do is be prepared for it. When disaster strikes, the time to prepare has passed. You should be prepared in advance. I use the same slide in my thank you slide because this is the general theme of the whole discussion today. Okay. Now, there are standards, very many standards. I'm not going to ask you about these. Those of you who are interested, all the information is available on the net. The Sendai framework is a framework that was put forward in Japan, and they said at a global level that you should understand the risk involved. You must have the strength and the governance to deal with that kind of a risk. And you must invest in resilience. The system must be able to cope, even though by definition it is difficult to cope, but you must have the resilience to mobilize resources and to cope. And in continuation of that philosophy, you must have enhancing preparedness. And they add two other important things. One of them is that every citizen in the world has a legal right to survive a disaster, which puts a big responsibility on the government and the healthcare system. And that they say that the most badly affected people, like like it is in every walk of life, in every sphere, is social vulnerability. The less privileged, the poor, and the needy, they are the ones who have the biggest vulnerability, they sustain the biggest amount of damage and perhaps loss of life. And so any system, any governance, if it is looking at global standards, must specially address this section of society. So if you think about when you're thinking this and say, okay, I must set up a system which is resilient and which can look after, where we can face a disaster, what do you think would be the levels of management? Karthik.
So first is like prevention. Before the
That
disaster,
is
we
not
have
the level of management.
Okay.
That would be the mechanism of prevention. So when you're looking at a system in the world
Yes,
or in
sir.
a country, what are the levels of management? What are the levels of healthcare systems that should address this issue? Okay, there must be a national government level thought on disaster management, state government, local government, hospital system. Remember, it's a system, not just an individual hospital. An individual hospital, and it boils down to departmental level, Department of Medicine, Surgery, and things like that. Every one of these people at different levels must be thinking about it and must have some idea about how one should go about if a disaster occurs. Okay, is there a national level system in this country? Anybody knows about it? Anybody heard of this organization?
NDMA.
Yes, sir.
What is it?
National Disaster Management Association.
Association?
Authority.
Authority. Okay. Have you seen anything about it? Does it have a website? Do you know anything about it? This is why I mentioned reading the chapter in Bailey Love is not enough. Okay. Please spend some time, all of you. This 1 hour discussion doesn't permit me to go into great details. Okay. This is a National Disaster Management Authority. They have a very good website, plenty of information which you actually cannot digest. I've gone through it. I've seen bits of it, not every bit of it, but quite a bit of it. And there is a very comprehensive and useful information on that site. Okay, this is the home page, and there is a 10-point agenda put forward by the Prime Minister. Okay, and this is DRR is disaster risk reduction, right? So they also have an app. I have not used this app, to be honest, but I plan to download it and have a look at it at some time. I didn't have time recently, but I think it's all of us should perhaps download this and see, and it gives you geo-targeted, alerts to citizens about disasters, floods, cyclones, landslides, and the like. Very, very interesting. And they also tell you advanced warning from the Met department. So I think it's something we should know about. It's called Sachet. Okay. Now to look at, I won't go into the details of the so-called 10-point program, but what the PM's program stresses is that all developmental sectors must have the thought process about disaster risk management. Again, what I mentioned, poor households to the big multinationals. Women's leadership role is important. Risk mapping, okay, of the vulnerable areas is important. Use technology to try and face this. Develop a network so that you can communicate with each other and exchange information and knowledge. Use social media and mobile technologies for risk reduction. Again, communication is the hallmark of that kind of interaction. Build on the local capacity and learn from previous disasters. there will be a lot of lacunae in the way we handle disasters. So in a subsequent disaster when it occurs, you should not have the same lacunae getting repeated. There may be new ones, but we should learn from the previous. Okay. And of course, extend it to international cooperation. It's not just national. All right. And if you look at the website, there are 38 guidelines about how you should handle different kinds of disasters, from drought to flooding to how to deal with the dead after a disaster, tsunamis, all right, landslides, nuclear and radiological emergencies, biological disasters, a whole lot of them. And you can download all these documents. I've had a brief look at them and it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of learning to do. It takes a lot of time to read that. I don't expect you to read every one of them, but at least know where it is available so that if and when you have an opportunity, try and read it. It's important to understand some definitions. That's why I put up this slide. A crisis is a big problem, any big problem. It may be an emergency or a disaster or a catastrophe, right? That is the spectrum that you find in a crisis. An emergency is where you have an organization's resources and capabilities are challenged, but are manageable. In a disaster, as Mahathir mentioned, it overwhelms the capacity of the organization. And in catastrophe, even if you mobilize everything, all resources are completely overtaken or overwhelmed, and you have extensive destruction. Okay, that means there's extensive damage. In a disaster, you might be able to limit the damage because you still are able to mobilize resources with your planning, but in a catastrophe, you cannot. Okay, those are the definitions that we must be aware of. And a system in a disaster, it's common sense, there's nothing great about it. It must be flexible, it must be adaptable. A lot of information is given, importance is given to communication, because that's the only thing that helps you mobilize resources. And through communication, you coordinate with other agencies. Because as you know, you are overwhelmed. Your own organization's resources are overwhelmed. So you have to communicate and cooperate and coordinate with other institutions for you to be able to deal with the disaster. Okay. So phases of disaster management. When you think about planning and okay, I want to minimize the damage from a disaster, what are the phases that you think of? Nikita, you want to have a go?
First starts with the disaster.
Okay.
Once the disaster happens, there'll be a response.
Mhm.
And from the response, after the there will be a recovery, sir.
Mhm.
Then comes mitigation and preparation for the next disaster in case it happens.
Ines, is she correct?
So it starts with the pre-disaster phase, sir. Like mitigation should be first.
Quite. That is the important thing. Mitigation is being prepared to reduce the damage, right? So it's a pre-disaster thing. You can't, once disaster has occurred, if you have not taken steps to mitigate it earlier, you won't succeed. Okay, it can be structural and non-structural. Structural means what? I can only give you very brief examples. All right. Fortification of a building for earthquakes. There are special building characteristics that you can use. Or building well-stocked nuclear disaster shelters underground. These are structural mitigation methods, okay, phases. Non-structural is to have a networked communication, not the technical or the hardware part of the communication, but have a network of hospitals, network of other institutions, network of rehabilitation centers and the like, where you can distribute the workload as and when a disaster occurs. Okay, preparedness is the next place. Resource and response planning. Okay, I have an emergency department which has 10 beds at a time. What if I get 45 people? All right, then you start thinking, okay, I can use my general ward, empty the general ward and do something. I can empty something else and do something, things like that. That is the kind of resource preparedness. And response planning. What if I need a lot of IV fluids, antibiotics, and a lot of monitoring equipment and things like that. So we've got to shift it from somewhere to somewhere and also have a kind of redundancy, both in staff and materials, both in staff and equipment, to see that you can manage if the thing occurs. Okay. Resource crisis management and resource crunch. This is where you have to mobilize the staff that come. You plan and keep the staff, maybe even have a bench strength if you can afford it, which is very difficult. But then you have to mobilize them. Once you mobilize them, it's not enough. They can't be working only 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day. They may have to work much longer hours. Then you have to feed them. Let them go and take rest for a couple of hours or 4 or 5 hours and come back to deal with the patients. Things like that. You have to think about it. Have a dormitory where they can take rest. I'm giving simple examples, but it will be a lot more extensive than that. And the recovery phase is that, well, it has disaster, the event has occurred and passed, but then you have to let the community recover. That's an important thing, and see how you can rehabilitate these people. And when you do that, you will recognize the deficiency in the mitigation phase. You would have thought of something that would not be adequate and you end up with a problem in the recovery phase. And that leads you to improvement of mitigation, which means you go back to the pre-disaster phase to be prepared for the next disaster. Then you know the deficiencies and you improve those deficiencies so that you are better prepared if and when the next disaster occurs. Okay, so what are the types of disasters that you can think of? Ayanas?
So, like it can be classified into like based on the cause, sir, whether it is natural or man-made, sir.
Good.
Then in terms of the scale, sir, whether it is affecting only one locality or a region, or is it
Correct.
global or this, sir?
Correct.
Then in terms of duration, sir,
Right.
how long is it going for? Like, for example, an earthquake will be an acute scenario,
Right.
but like the tsunami will be prolonged, like that.
Agreed.
Sir.
Yeah. So the
And-
basic thing, yeah, that's good. That's all I need.
Yes.
So the basic thing is either it's natural or it's man-made or hybrid. There can be a combination of the two. All right. In a natural disaster, it could be geophysical. Example, Anas.
So earthquake, sir.
Yes. Hydrological.
A tsunami, sir.
Flood. Climatological can be tsunami. It can also be tsunami. Biological.
So because of some sort of poisoning, sir.
Not poisoning is chemical, right? Biological is some kind of a COVID is a biological disaster.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Man-made accidents. Give one example for each.
So
Plane crash.
yes.
Industrial.
Some gas leak or
Yes, gas leak. Wars or nuclear, self-evident. Man-made environmental disaster.
a famine, sir.
Yeah. Anything, a famine, or you can have the El Nino, global warming. It's
Yes.
all, man-made disaster. And a hybrid,
Mm,
okay, combination is very simple. One simple example, you have an earthquake where you have a nuclear reactor. So not only do you have the earthquake destroying it, but you will have radiation exposure because of that. There are any number of such examples. You have an earthquake and a dam breaks in the area of a dam, and so you have flooding beyond that and things like that. So these are the types of disasters that you have to think of. Ravi, anything to add so far?
No, sir. I think it's fairly comprehensive.
Yeah. Okay. What are the types of damage that you can get in a disaster? What are the kinds of injuries and the kind of human suffering that one can see in a disaster? Mahati, you want to have a go at it? Or Malavika, you have not spoken today, right? Malavika, go have a go at it.
Sir, damages can be direct because of the direct effect, like the collapsed buildings, the injuries like abrasions.
So what are the injuries? Yeah.
Abrasions, lacerations, contusions.
You're not going to see abrasions with the collapse of a building, young lady. All right. Okay. No, I don't mean to laugh at you or anything. I'm just saying there'll be a huge damage, right? So what would be big crush injury?
Crush injuries.
All right. What else can happen? Yeah, go on. Think of all the damage. We have listed all the natural and man-made disasters. No. So what happens if there's a gas leak?
The fatalities.
Right. Before they die, some system gets damaged, right? Okay, multiple injuries. So because of the type of disaster and the type of damage that occurs out of a disaster, as a surgeon, as a doctor, you must think of these things. Okay, multiple injuries, very bad injuries. So you must have in your planning the need for a lot of blood transfusion. Okay, not 5, 10, 12 units, maybe 150 units. So your planning must include mobilization of volunteers who can give blood. Okay, that's the kind of thinking you must have. And your control must be damage control. You don't go and try to fix everything. Do the minimum possible to keep the patient alive. That would be your strategy. Both because you cannot repair everything and because you have so many operations to do that you can't spend a lot of time on one patient. Just do enough in a short period of time to keep him alive, to repair the whole thing on a subsequent occasion, maybe 2 days, 3 days later. Just do enough and flit from one OT to another OT. Just stop the bleeding, control the leak. That's all that's required, a bowel leak, for example. And then move on, do a laparostomy and move on. So that is the kind of thinking you must have. So if you have a blast injury, you must know that the outside doesn't look very damaged, but there can be very big internal damage. Blast injuries is a topic by itself. Okay, in a bomb blast, terrorist bomb, or a war-like situation. Think of barrow trauma to the lung, barrow trauma to the other organs. And so the internal damage is a lot more extensive than external damage. That is something you have to bear in mind. Thermal injuries, the main thing you have to do is to resuscitate. They lose fluid, as you know. And so the first 24 to 48 hours, focus on resuscitation. Always understand that in any thermal injury, there is likely to be an inhalational injury, ARDS and the like. So give attention to the lung as well. In an infective disease, apart from treating the patient, it is infective and the healthcare staff will be affected. And so have systems for isolation and use PPE yourself to save yourself and your staff. Nuclear disaster is a huge problem, a huge topic by itself. I can't explain everything here, but note this website. It gives you good information about nuclear damage. Generally, remember that a radiation damage is a combination of burns. It can be a blast injury because a nuclear blast will give you a big blast. Hematological disorders, GI disorders, and CNS disorders. Okay, they can actually collapse rapidly because of the involvement of the central nervous system. You have to then think about irradiation versus contamination. Any idea what it is, Malavika? Pavitra, you want to know? Can you tell me the difference between irradiation and contamination?
Sir, irradiation is mainly the radiological effects that happens on the body, sir.
Correct.
like radiation enteritis, it could be, for example.
Correct.
And contamination, generally, because of all the general waste that is created in a nuclear disaster, how it affects the body, not just the radiation part of it. Is it that?
That's not it. Contamination is the patient is within inverted commas infected. When I say
Okay, sir.
infection, I talked about PPE, right?
Yes,
This
sir.
is not called infective. I just said it as an example. The
Okay,
patient
sir.
can give you radiation damage.
Okay, sir. Got it.
That is contamination. That happens
Okay, sir.
when there is, radioactive powder or dust, radioactive fluid on the patient's body.
Okay, sir.
Sometimes they may have ingested some radioactive fluid, and that is so strong that it can actually be, his body is emitting radiation,
Okay,
and
sir.
it can damage the healthcare worker. That is the
Okay,
difference.
sir.
So
Okay, sir.
when you have radiation damage, you must be thinking of possible contamination and protect yourself. Wear protective clothing, wear a mask, and make sure that you don't get all those dust and fluid spilled onto your body. Okay, toxic gases like the Bhopal disaster or sarin chemical warfare. They can be either irritants on the skin, giving you very bad skin blisters and blebs, or they can be asphyxiants. Okay, they can cause damage to the lung. And I'm going to run through all this because, as I said, it's a vast topic. My idea is to give you a holistic picture of all the things that you should be thinking about when there is a disaster. Okay, it's not, each one of them is a topic by itself. We can talk for an hour on each one of these things. So toxic gases are different types: nerve agents, choking agents, blood agents, and blister agents. We know about mustard gas, which is one of the common chemical warfare. It is banned, but people still use it. Cyanide, as you know, is a blood agent. It causes lack of oxygen transport. Phosgene are choking agents. Sarin and other things are nerve agents, which can cause neurological damage. Okay, so you must have some idea of what the agent is, the damaging agent is, so that you can then consider the primary treatment that is required. Okay, so when you know that these are all the possibilities, then you must know that the planning must consist of these issues. Vulnerability assessment. How vulnerable is your system? So if you think about that in our hospitals in this country, for example, you are extremely vulnerable. You must look at historical assessment. If you did have, if not a complete disaster, even if you had a lot of many emergencies, what were the difficulties that you had in facing so many patients at a time? Then you can then plan better for the next time. Supply chain integrity, physically there is a damage. You cannot reach your supplier of medicines or other equipment. Do you have alternative suppliers? Infrastructure integrity. Okay. Do you have enough space in your facility to deal with a large number of patients? Communication capabilities. What happens if the internet is down? What happens if your phone network is down? Do you have satellite phones, for example, which are independent of these kinds of physical communications, infrastructure? Maybe we should have satellite phones so where you can communicate. Community engagement. How much are we involving the community around you? All right. Red Cross, for example, is an organization. You can have blood banks in the area which may help you, and things like that. Home Guard. Home Guard is another organization. Are you liaising with the Home Guard now to see if you can take their help if the need requires? So these are the kinds of thought processes that must go on. This is at the system level, but what affects us more directly is a hospital level consideration. Okay, so in this, the size of the letters does not indicate the importance. Okay, if the communication, for example, is in the smaller letter because it's a longer word, all of them are equally important. So I'm not asking you questions for lack of time. I'll just go through what each one has to be thought of, okay, when we do this. So let's look at governance. Please understand that every system must have well laid out hierarchy. There must be a command structure. You must know who the boss is. There will be an assistant boss with the hospital. If the boss, something happens to the boss, or he needs to take a rest or whatever, the assistant boss takes over. And there is a hierarchy, and that must be laid down. Particularly in a disaster, each one wants to do his own thing. And there must be a sutradhara, okay, the guy who directs everybody else, and he should have the know-how to make optimal use of the resources available. Also remember that if there is a busy emergency department dealing with a disaster, there are existing patients, ICU for example, very ill patients, or patients in the middle of an operation, patients who need emergency operations for other reasons other than the disaster. That cannot be forgotten. So there must be a plan to deal with that as well. Surge planning. Surge is there's a big surge of need for resources when there's a disaster. It means staff. I mentioned briefly about it. You must be able to get them at short notice, look after them, feed them, give them some space for rest, but then bring them back, after a 3 or 4 hour rest and ask them to work. So staff must be primed. They must be mentioned. They must be trained about the requirement that may occur, and they must be given detailed information as to how their services will be utilized. Similarly, materials. It is said that every hospital must store a 3-month supply of materials. Remember, materials that are used on a day-to-day work would not be enough, because this is a huge surge of patients. So maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times the number of materials that you normally use must be stored in the hospital. If you want to do all this, there must be space for storage, and I repeat, space for people to eat and maybe take rest, space other than the 10 or 15 beds in the casualty department for you to undertake triage. I'm going to talk about triage a little bit, and maybe expansion of the operation theater to see what you want. If necessary, you may have to have temporary operation theaters in tents in the compound of the hospital, right? All that is required. And data systems, you can't work without data. So you must have ID for all patients. There must be a case record. There must be an operation notes. So you must suddenly get a surge or an expansion of the data that you have people to do the data entry, because you will have a huge amount of data. So think about data systems as well. This is for surge planning. Communication, redundancy. Okay, what did I, some systems may break down. So if your internet breaks down, have a different supplier, service provider. Have more than one company giving you telephone connection. Have several satellite phones. That is a redundancy. And you must always predetermine whom you will go to for help. That is external liaison. You don't think about it once the disaster occurs. Well before the disaster occurs, you have a protocol, an SOP, standard operating procedure, that if I have this problem, I'll do this. If I'm going to contact this person. All right. Training is everything. Training is everything. I've never seen a disaster drill in any of the hospitals here. I have had experienced one disaster drill in Aberdeen where I was working. Okay. So you must have regular classes or discussions among the staff, various levels of the staff, as to what is expected of them, and have drills, just like you have cardiac arrest code as a drill. You must have that for disasters as well. All right. This is an interesting concept that when you have a disaster, it's a free for all for everybody. Everybody is running everywhere, helter skelter. And so you can have 2 kinds of problems that can occur. One of them is relatives may come and see you working on a damaged patient, for example. They may create a lot of problems because they think that you're not doing it right. So you have to have access control. You have to have the security where you do not allow everybody to all areas where care is being undertaken. And when that situation becomes very critical, you must have a lockdown, which means nobody enters or leaves the hospital. So you must have the kind of security arrangement where no relative comes, nobody comes in or out once the disaster has occurred, so that you have control on what you're doing inside. And that lockdown may then be lifted and you can create an access control so that the healthcare workers can work in peace. Okay. I didn't ask you these things because I honestly didn't think you would have read about these things. Tell me honestly, had you read about these things anywhere? Nikita?
Yes, sir. The
You
basic
had.
concepts I have read, sir.
Very good. Malavika?
No, sir.
No, okay. So maybe I should have asked you questions, but it takes a long time to get it out of you. So I just wanted to give you this. But now we go to the final phase of what a doctor actually does. Okay, and that is a triage. What is a triage? Sai Likit. Likit, I have not spoken to you today. Go on, tell me, what is a triage?
Yes, sir. Prioritizing the patients based on the severity of injury, like when resources are limited.
Correct. Okay. This is your definition, layman's definition in a Webster's dictionary, sorting and allocation of treatment to patients. Okay. Giving a priority, who should do what. WHO has a slightly nuanced definition, sorting of patients into priority groups according to their need and for the likely benefit from the medical care. Okay. The philosophy here is do the maximum good to the maximum number of patients. That is the important thing. It's a very, very important and a very taxing job for a doctor. Okay, it's a very taxing job for a doctor, but you have to take that responsibility and do it. And you have what are called color codes or codes for a trash. Any of you familiar with it? Likit?
Yes, sir. Red, yellow, black, green.
No, can you tell me what they mean?
Yes, sir. Red means like immediate life-threatening injury, needs immediate intervention, like treatment.
Correct.
Yes, and green means like walking patients, like no, not required immediate intervention.
Right. Okay. Anyway, I'll tell
Black,
you that's okay. Yeah, what is black? Yeah, that's important.
black means like pulseless moribund patients. Sir.
Patient is dead, practically. Yeah. So the trash can be at the field or in the hospital. Most of us doctors may not be in the field. We are usually working in the hospital and we have to trash there. In the field, nurses are also trained for trash. Okay. That's important because they must prioritize who gets shifted to the hospital in a limited ambulance facility that's available. Okay, these are the categories. Red is that you go in, these are the top priority. You can salvage the patient, you go in and do it. Okay, yellow means you can delay the treatment a little bit. So they definitely need care, but you can delay it a little bit. Green, minor injuries. Blue, patients who have injuries requiring extensive treatment that exceeds the resources available. This is really, really very difficult. Okay. And this is where you actually let them go. That's a difficult decision. Black is they're dead. Basically, they're dead. And you don't do any resuscitation because the thing is so badly, you can't waste half an hour giving them a CPR. You just let them go. The blue is a difficult one. The injuries requiring extensive treatment, and you just don't have the resources to do it. And so you just say, okay, let's leave them be. And that is a difficult decision. Remember, where you can have them is the red ones. They are the ones that are prioritized to receive maximum amount of treatment within the resources available. Okay. Any questions or doubts, comments, Ravi?
No, sir, it's very comprehensive. I had not read a lot of these things, so it's good learning for me too.
All right.
No, I'm not talking about triage, but
I know the other things.
aspects.
Yeah. Sanya?
Sir, same here, sir. I had read few of them, but most of it is
All right.
very vast.
Karthik, any comments?
Nothing, sir. Like even I am seeing few things are very new. Like,
All right.
So just one doubt that I had was,
Yeah.
Is there any, like, are the hospitals prioritized? Which hospital will take the disaster first? Is it always the government hospitals and then comes the other hospitals, or all the hospitals are expected to be prepared in case of
All
a
the
disaster?
hospitals are expected to be prepared.
Yes. So, and what about the cost in private hospitals, sir? Who will
That nobody thinks about a cost when there's a disaster.
Because in few hospitals, resources will not be available, and most of the times you ask the patients to get it or bring it from outside, things like that. And at that time,
that is a tragedy, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
That should not happen. As I keep saying, you must have a 3-month stock of whatever is required. I know it is theoretical. I know it's not available everywhere, but that is the ideal. So, in a disaster, there's sorry, go on.
So any experience of mass casualty or disaster in state level?
I haven't had any personal experience, to be honest. Even though, as I said, I've had a drill for a disaster in Aberdeen, and we knew about these things that I spoke about at that time, when I was a registrar, and we were prepared for it, but we never had it. We had maybe only an emergency where at a time, I remember dealing with a blast injury on one of the offshore oil rigs in Aberdeen, the North Sea oil. Aberdeen is the capital for that. And there was a blast, one of the gas cylinders burst, and we had about 7 or 8 people brought in at the same time with burns and blast injury, evacuated by helicopter. And on investigation, 1 or 2 of them needed laparotomy for damaged liver, but the others mostly had inhalation injuries and burns. So that is at a time we had about 7 or 8 patients at that time, and that's the maximum I've had. Ravi, you have any experience?
No, I know, sir. I don't remember having any experience with any major disasters.
Yeah, no,
But
I really haven't.
Drills, we have been part of many drills.
Yes.
And fortunately, I think preparedness is good, but no practical experience.
Yeah.
One thing I have to say is, if you remember, some 15, 20 years ago, in the tsunamis and cyclones, we would have had thousands of people die. And but the preparedness and the National Disaster Management Authority has come into force, and planning and the Met Office giving advance warning, evacuation of people, and all these things. We have hardly had any casualties. I think that is one of the successes of the NDM, the National Disaster Management Authority. I think they are doing a stellar job. Wherever there is a disaster, they are quickly there and they manage a lot of good things. So planning is extremely important, as you said.
Correct. The only thing I remember in Bangalore is one of those Indian Airlines flights. It landed well short of the runway in the earlier stages of this fly-by-wire technique. Okay, one of those Airbus planes, and several people died, and there were many casualties. I know that these patients, it didn't happen in our hospital, but these patients were distributed by some authority among 5 or 6 hospitals, so that they did manage to treat the injured ones reasonably well on that occasion. That's the nearest I came to a disaster. Okay. I hope that this will stimulate you to, look at this topic, read up, particularly go and spend some time on the NDMA website. It's extensive, and the amount of information there can sometimes overwhelm you. But be patient, don't do it in one go. Keep looking at little bits of it over a period of time, and you will have the confidence. I was particularly impressed because they even tell you what you should do with the communication when you have a communication problem, what you should do with the dead, and things like that, which is an extremely useful information to have. Okay, closing remarks from Ravi, and then we'll close the session.
Sir, I think you have stimulated people to be prepared for the disaster, but not just in terms of reading about it, but also if at all as surgeons we may be in the forefront of managing some of these problems. So it is better to not just be prepared about managing the patient per se, but all the other paraphernalia that goes with it. So I think it was a very enlightening and eye-opening talk.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much and good night. I'll close the meeting.
Good night, sir.
Good night, sir.
Good night.